One of the greatest traps of modern life is the obsession with external validation. We live in a world where everything is measured in public, likes, followers, applause, comments, promotions, and titles. We are conditioned to look outward to determine our worth. And yet, that hunger for validation is exactly what keeps people trapped in cycles of insecurity and emptiness. If you want to make yourself proud, the very first step is to stop living as though your worth depends on the judgment of others. The problem with external validation is not that recognition is bad. Humans are social creatures. We are wired to respond to approval, but when you become dependent on it, when you make applause your fuel, you become fragile. Why? Because you hand over control of your identity to forces you cannot control. One day, the crowd cheers for you. The next day, it boos. If your sense of worth rises and falls with that noise, you will live in a constant state of anxiety. You think about it. Most of the people whose opinions you're worried about won't even remember you in 5 years. Yet we give away so much power to them in the present. This is why so many people feel hollow after achieving something that looked impressive to the world. They climbed the ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. They earned applause, but lost themselves in the process. To truly make yourself proud, you must shift the source of your validation from external applause to internal alignment. That means asking yourself, am I living in accordance with my values? Am I acting in a way that I respect even if no one else notices? Because respect from others is unpredictable, but self-respect is entirely within your control. There's an old saying, character is what you do when no one is watching. And it's true. Anyone can perform goodness when the lights are on and the crowd is watching. But the measure of a person's pride is whether they can look in the mirror at night and feel a quiet sense of dignity, knowing they lived authentically, even if nobody clapped. This is not just philosophy. Psychology backs it up. Studies show that people who base their self-worth on external markers, appearance, status, approval, tend to experience higher levels of anxiety and depression. Their self-esteem swings wildly depending on circumstances. But those who root their worth in intrinsic values like growth, contribution, faith, or integrity experience far greater stability and resilience. In simple terms, if your sense of worth depends on others, it's borrowed and temporary. If it depends on your principles, it's permanent and unshakable. Now, of course, rejecting external validation doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of others. It doesn't mean saying, I don't care what anyone thinks. That too is a kind of maturity. What it means is recognizing the difference between feedback and validation. Feedback can help you improve. It's useful, but validation is about worth, and your worth must not come from outside. There is also a spiritual dimension here. If you are constantly chasing the approval of people, you will lose sight of the approval of the one that actually matters. In Islam, there is a profound concept: whomever Allah is pleased with, the people will be pleased with too. This means if your foundation is right, if you live by integrity, faith, and sincerity, then human approval will follow naturally in its own time. But if you flip it and chase people first, you will never find peace. Let me give you an example. Imagine two students preparing for an exam. One studies hard, motivated by the pursuit of knowledge and self-respect. The other studies only to impress friends and avoid embarrassment. On exam day, both may succeed. But when the applause fades, the first student still feels proud because their effort aligned with their values. The second feels empty because their effort was never truly their own. That difference between pride rooted in self-respect and pride borrowed from others is the difference between a life of quiet dignity and a life of endless chasing. Okay? So how do you stop seeking external validation? Start small. The next time you accomplish something, resist the urge to immediately broadcast it for applause. Sit with it quietly. Ask yourself if you're genuinely proud of how you handled it. Another step is to redefine success in private terms. Instead of asking, "Did they like me?" ask, "Did I live up to my own standards? Did I act with courage, honesty, or discipline?" It's also worth confronting the uncomfortable truth that you will never please everyone. No matter what you do, someone will criticize you. If you live for approval, you will twist yourself into endless shapes trying to satisfy people who are unsatisfiable. But if you live for principle, you will stand tall, even in the face of criticism, because you know your actions were rooted in something solid. At the end of the day, making yourself proud is about reclaiming ownership of your soul. It is about standing before the mirror and knowing I live today in a way that was true to me. That sense of integrity is far more valuable than 1,000 claps from the crowd. Most people live their lives chasing comfort. They look for the softest chair, the easiest task, the path of least resistance. And on the surface, this seems logical. Why wouldn't you want life to be easier? But here's the problem: comfort, when elevated to the highest priority, slowly erodes your potential. It numbs your edge. It teaches you to avoid the very discomfort that is necessary for growth. Discipline, by contrast, is what pulls you forward. It is the decision to act not because it feels good, but because it is right, necessary, and meaningful. When you think about the people you admire, those who seem unshakable, who accomplish difficult things, they are not necessarily the most talented or the most gifted. They are often simply the ones who trained themselves to do the hard things consistently, even when they didn't feel like it. That's the essence of discipline, the ability to override mood, impulse, and laziness with commitment. Commitment. Here's a simple truth. Comfort never created greatness. Comfort never built strength, resilience, or wisdom. Discipline did. Every meaningful achievement in human history, whether it was art, science, exploration, or leadership, required people to sacrifice the easy road for the disciplined one. Think of an athlete training before sunrise, an artist working through frustration, or a student pushing through fatigue. Those moments are not glamorous, but they are the foundation of mastery. Discipline is also psychological training. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you are reinforcing a message to yourself: I can be trusted. That trust in yourself is priceless. It builds confidence not through empty affirmations, but through lived experience. You know you are capable because you have proof. You've shown up when it was hard. You've done the work when no one was watching. And that inner trust is what separates people who collapse under pressure from those who hold steady. Now, discipline doesn't mean punishing yourself or living in misery. That's a misunderstanding. True discipline is not about rejecting joy or pleasure. It's about ordering your priorities so that fleeting comforts don't derail your deeper commitments. It's about choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term relief. For example, discipline in health means you still enjoy food, but you don't let cravings dictate your body's destiny. Discipline in work means you rest when needed, but you don't procrastinate until every deadline becomes a crisis. Discipline is balance, but balance with backbone. There's also a hidden gift in discipline, freedom, that may sound contradictory at first. After all, discipline feels like rules and restrictions. But think about it. A disciplined person has the freedom to say yes or no with authority. They have the freedom to pursue goals without being constantly enslaved to distraction, laziness, or fear. In contrast, the person who always seeks comfort becomes a prisoner of impulse. They may look free because they do what they want in the moment, but in reality, they're trapped in cycles of regret, unfulfilled potential, and dependency on ease. Discipline is the path to genuine autonomy. Another important point: discipline doesn't just build success, it builds character. Life will inevitably throw chaos at you: loss, disappointment, unexpected challenges. If you've lived only for comfort, those moments will break you because you'll have no muscle for enduring hardship. But if you've trained in discipline, hardship becomes bearable. You've already practiced choosing the hard path voluntarily, so when difficulty comes involuntarily, you're not crushed by it. Discipline makes you resilient, but let's be clear, discipline doesn't magically appear. It's cultivated through small, consistent choices. You don't build discipline by waiting for motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. Discipline is what carries you when motivation disappears. That's why the smallest daily actions, waking up on time, finishing what you start, keeping your promises, matter so much. They're not trivial, they're the training ground where your future self is forged. The danger is thinking you'll build discipline once life gets easier. That's the lie comfort whispers. You'll start tomorrow when things calm down, but tomorrow never comes. There will always be distractions, difficulties, and excuses. Discipline is built today in the midst of imperfection, not in some ideal future where everything aligns. And ironically, the very act of waiting for comfort guarantees you'll never grow because growth requires discomfort by definition. So what do you do with this knowledge? You start by reframing discomfort as a signal, not an enemy. Discomfort tells you where the edge of your growth lies. If something is hard, that's precisely why you should lean into it. Each time you do, you expand what you're capable of. Discipline isn't about crushing yourself. It's about training yourself to embrace the resistance that leads to strength and the reward, pride. Not the shallow pride of showing off, but the deep pride of knowing you chose the harder, better road. Pride of integrity, pride of resilience, pride of becoming someone who doesn't fold under pressure. That pride cannot be given by others. It can only be earned by disciplined action. So remember this, comfort feels good now, but discipline feels good forever. One fades quickly, the other builds a lifetime of strength and confidence. Every time you face the choice, you are shaping who you will become. Don't ask what feels easiest right now. Ask what choice will make me proud tomorrow. That's the heart of discipline. Most people measure their worth only by the results they achieve. They obsess over the outcome, the grades on the paper, the number in their bank account, the title on their business card, or the recognition they receive from others. But here's the truth, results are only one part of the story. What truly defines growth and builds lasting confidence is not just the final outcome, but the progress you make along the way. The journey itself is where you develop the strength, character, and resilience that outcomes alone cannot give you. If you only celebrate results, you set yourself up for a cycle of frustration. Why? Because results are often delayed, inconsistent, or even beyond your control. You can put in the work, and life might still throw you setbacks. If your sense of worth depends solely on the outcome, you'll constantly feel like you're failing, even when, in reality, you're growing in ways you can't yet measure. That's why learning to value progress is so important. It gives you a reason to keep moving forward even when the destination feels far away. You think of a mountain climber. If they only feel proud when they reach the peak, they will spend 500 Jolser Wu of the journey feeling inadequate because the summit is always above them. But if they take pride in every step upward, every obstacle overcome, every small gain in strength, then the climb itself becomes a source of fulfillment. And ironically, people who focus on progress tend to reach their goals more consistently because they fuel themselves with encouragement instead of self-criticism. Psychologically, progress recognition rewires your relationship with effort. When you acknowledge small wins, your brain starts associating discipline and hard work with reward. You create momentum. On the other hand, if you only reward yourself at the finish line, you train yourself to feel deprived and dissatisfied during the entire process. That's why so many people quit halfway. They've been trained to think that effort without immediate results is meaningless, when in fact effort itself Celebrating progress doesn't mean you lower your standards or stop aiming high. It means you recognize that results are a byproduct of consistent progress, not a substitute for it. For example, if your aim is to become physically fit, don't wait until you have the perfect body to feel proud. Be proud of showing up at the gym, proud of finishing a tough workout, proud of choosing water instead of soda. Each of those small victories builds the foundation for the bigger transformation. And the truth is, if you don't learn to value the small steps, even reaching the big goal won't satisfy you for long. There's a deeper point here too. Celebrating progress cultivates humility and gratitude. When you pause to acknowledge how far you've come, you recognize the gap between where you started and where you are now. That awareness creates a sense of respect for your own journey and for the effort it took to get here. It shifts your focus away from envy and comparison because you realize your growth is unique to you. Instead of obsessing over someone else's success, you honor the steps you've personally taken. And let's be clear, progress is not always linear. Sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back. But even setbacks can be progress if you learn from them. Failure teaches you things success never could: resilience, adaptability, and humility. If you only measure results, failure is the end of the story. If you measure progress, failure is just another chapter in your growth. It becomes a stepping stone instead of a stopping point. This perspective is powerful because it allows you to sustain motivation over the long term. Anyone can be motivated for a day or a week, but life's most meaningful goals take years, sometimes decades. Without a mindset that celebrates progress, you will burn out long before the results arrive. But if you can find pride in daily progress, you give yourself a renewable source of energy. You learn to wake up each day not needing the world's approval, but finding satisfaction in knowing you're further along than yesterday. And here's where it all ties back to making yourself proud. Pride is not just about what you've achieved, it's about who you've become in the process. When you celebrate progress, you acknowledge the person you are building step by step. You see yourself not as a failure for not being there yet, but as someone on a meaningful path, and that shift changes everything. So the next time you feel like you're falling short, stop and ask yourself, am I further than I was last month? Am I stronger than I was last year? Have I taken steps, however small, toward the person I want to become? If the answer is yes, then you are progressing, and progress is success in motion. Don't wait for perfection to feel proud. Don't wait for the applause, the trophy, or the title. Learn to be proud of the small victories because they are the building blocks of the larger ones. If you can celebrate the process, the results will eventually follow, and when they do, they will mean far more because you'll know what it took to get there.